Poppy, do you like reggae music? Do you like dub mixes? Do you like reggae dub mixes? Okay. Good morning, rockers. This is John from Global Reverb, and I'm going to show you what not to do when setting up your own dub studio and when trying to put together something that you'd like to call professional. This is a couple of videos I call Dub Done Wrong, and I want you to come with me and have a look inside the studio to see all the things I'm doing wrong because of budget limitations and space. So come and have a look. So in order for a normal person to set up a dub studio or any kind of little music studio, you're going to need some kind of space to start with. As you can see, we've done some nice bottle windows here, but what we've got, actually, it's the part of the house that no one wants to use, and it's the smallest room in the whole place. You can see the cats like to poop here, but really, it was the only space available. So behind this little door, which doesn't have a lock or a handle, I found the smallest room in the house and I decided to set up a little studio. As you can see, I've got all that amateur stuff going on, such as egg cartons rather. And inside this room, which is part of the roof because it slants down, this room is the smallest room in the whole place. So let's have a look. To start this, things aren't actually hooked up so I could just press an on button and turn on the studio. What I've got instead is a series of switches and plugs under the desk, which I can assure you is probably the least efficient way to set up your studio. But I'll give you a look about what I'm talking about, and it looks like this. This is one bank of cables. They're not knotted together or anything, but they're certainly not a pretty sight. But yeah, you can see I've got these multiple power banks screwed up onto the wall under the table. It's smart to keep it off the ground, and you don't really want to have all your cables on the ground because you want to keep the floor space clear for your feet or anything else you might want to put down here. But I have to physically turn on 3 different sections of the studio before the studio itself is activated. I like to switch off whatever effects I can switch off, so that later I can turn it back on and I don't have to worry about running the machine non-stop for 12 hours or more at a time. Over here I've got my desktop PC, which I guess was top of the line about 3 years ago or so. Nowadays I'd probably rather use a laptop or something portable, because having an old school PC like this means you can only stay in one room to do your work. Alright, I have to switch that on. Over here I got even more switches. Basically a criminal couldn't come in and turn on my studio. Only I know where all the plugs are. But that causes a lot of strife, having to crawl down there at the beginning and end of every session. Anyway, I've got a MTK22. This is the Soundcraft fully digital multi-track in to my PC. I'm actually working without a DAW or a digital audio workspace. What I am doing is I use a MPC 5000, which is not new. It's at least 10 years old. But I like to use this because of the fat pads, the solid metal construction, and I even made it a bit old school with the wooden panels. I tried using different colored pads or fat pads, But I found the fat pad's response time wasn't very good. If the fat pads were a little off center, they might not trigger the sample at all. Also, everyone needs a keyboard, even if it's just a MIDI keyboard. Everybody needs some kind of keyboard in order to be able to play a few lines, or just to play directly into your computer. I've got the Korg, Micro Korg XL. The keys are a bit small, so that's the only thing I can say about it. The keys are a little small, and they're not weighted keys like a piano. But it did cost about 400 bucks, so the synth engine in it is worth every penny. Plus, as you can see, there's a mic in, and there's a vocoder function, which is probably the best thing about this unit. And it makes some pretty cool bass noises and other synth effects, just like any other synthesizer. So all you really need is a MIDI keyboard if you're just using your computer. If you're not using a computer, it's cool to have something that has synth effects that you can modify and change as you're going. Under here you can see too, it's not the cleanest or clearest back there. I've got like a computer fan that's not working. I've got some cables. My big muff pedal is dedicated to one bass channel, so I have two bass channels. One normal bass channel, which is the one that's going through the Big Muff Deluxe, and the sub bass channel, which is literally like a 808 kick, but more of a tone that I could use as a sub bass. The bass synth, on the other hand, is a pedal. This one's a Behringer pedal, but Boss also makes a bass synthesizer. This was literally under $50. So under 50 bucks to have a bass synthesizer is pretty cool, because you could even put that on drum beats and it creates a synth sound from the percussion. I recommend pedals to anyone really. I've got some basic effects modification pedals, like the bass EQ. The digital delay, the DD7 is great, but I really like the DD3. I got the DD7 because no one on the whole internet said anything bad about it, and the effects are very clean and crisp. I also have another Behringer pedal. I bought this basically because it does everything that the Boss Echo Machine says it does, and the price was half price. So even though I'm using all these pedals, you know, of course I'm a little bit cautious about noise. That's a tuner. So what I have is basically, I buy these from China. They cost about $1.50 each. Inside here the wire is bound up with a magnet inside, and therefore the sound that goes through these pedals will be noise reduced. So by the time that the sound comes back through here through the magnet, it shouldn't have any zzz or bzz sounds in it. My reverb tank doesn't really want to stay on the wall, but what you can do with that is just sort of pluck it. What's that sound like? So you can get a few dub effects that way. You should definitely keep your studio cleaner than this one. As you can see, every tool I use I kind of just put down where I left it. We love dog! And that's probably not a very smart thing to do. You probably also shouldn't use your studio as a storage area for other things, because then you can't really make room for the important things that you're trying to do, and you might distract yourself from what's really meant to be the focus of this room. Of course, compressors are always smart to have. Having more than one compressor is a great idea. This compressor's on the bass, so the bass tone will be squashed, and I'm talking about the bass synth in this case. I also have a reel-to-reel recorder, which, as I made a video previously, cost me about $100. And the reel-to-reel is a great thing to have. At the moment it's not on the spool, but you only really need one tape if you're making echoes. I have all these other tapes so I can master onto tape, because that's what they did in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But if you're mastering onto tape, it's better that your machine works correctly and tracks properly. This machine has a warble in it because some of the rubber rings in there are a little old, so when it plays back it warbles. It also warbles when you play normally, and when I'm making a delay effect on there, it has a warble in it which is very original, and I can't really fake that with any other effect, so I quite like having the warble effect on that 2-track tape machine. It's not a bad idea to have some kind of visual workspace that's not your computer screen. You know, maybe have some lyrics up there when you're doing your vocals, or maybe some other notes to yourself about EQ for a particular tune. It's smart to have something like that so you can always refer back to it without having to use electricity. You will need some kind of computer system to record the final mix, but as I said, I don't use the digital audio workspace. I only use SoundForge. Everyone needs some kind of computer, and that's just really to see the final mix and maybe to master it on your own computer system. It's also it's important to have a good set of speakers. I'm not claiming that these are a good set of speakers, but they weren't cheap and they're still good quality. It doesn't hurt to have 2 sets of speakers. Maybe one set to listen to things loud, which are a good quality pair of monitors, and maybe another set to hear how normal people would hear your music, say such as computer monitor speakers, or even going through a television to hear how your music sounds. I have a dedicated preamp just for my microphone. The reason I have a dedicated preamp for my microphone is because I like to put it through the tube, and the tube is going to soften and maybe a little bit warm up the sound from the mic. So in order to give it a sort of warmth and depth that is only analog, I want to put it through a tube first. I could just stick it straight in the mix. It would be very clean and very clear, but I'm not really going for clean and clear. I don't want all my music to be digital sounding. I want this stuff to really sound analog, like human beings made this music. As you can see, I've got dedicated channels for drums, percussion, bass, synth, Korg keyboard and the MPC keyboard. I've got other dedicated channels for my Echo, my rack, the Boss DD7, the microphone. This red channel here is the tape delay, and the tape delay has pride of place because I like to use the sweepable high mids and get that cool kind of phasing sound going in real time. Anyone can do this. Anyone can put together a studio and make music. You don't have to keep everything you do software based, because I can assure you, if you do everything on the computer, you may lose your original intention of trying to make a song that sounds like humans made it. There might not be enough noise in it. There might not be enough air in your recording. It makes a lot of sense to me to record with a microphone, and even if I'm just re-recording, say through something like this, this is a perfect kind of accompaniment to a computer system. What you can do is that you go out from your digital audio workspace into this box. It's basically a DI, but it's especially made to re-amplify a sound. And with something like this, you can go out of your computer into an amplifier, such as a guitar amplifier with a reverb and a tube overdrive, and then you can re-record that sound with a microphone, so your digital sound becomes an analog sound which has been treated with overdrive and echo or possibly reverb, and then by the time you record it through the microphone, it sounds like a real instrument and no longer a MIDI instrument. As I said, you don't need very much. This room is a pretty good example. You get an idea of how I tried to squash everything together, and it does work. When we move next year, I do plan to get a bigger room, more dedicated speakers, something a bit larger. But these speakers can be quite loud and they're very clear, so I do like to use them the way they are. If you're interested in putting together any kind of little studio, I would recommend that you save money by buying pedals instead of rack mount equipment. But if you want to be a professional, I would suggest you buy rack mount equipment instead of pedals. There's nothing wrong with having a few pedals in the mix, but generally speaking, a professional studio is going to prefer rack mounted equipment because of the lower noise ratio and probably better performance because the units are bigger. If you're running out of space, try what I did. Just get a bit of Velcro on the back of each pedal, and then I guess maybe in a year's time this whole wall will be full of pedals. And I should also have some kind of voltage regulation system so that the pedals don't make noise. But so far with my noise reduction cables, I haven't had any problems. And they're not noisy. I think all of these pedals are brand new, so there shouldn't be any noise issues anyway, unless you're buying vintage pedals from the 80s from Japan. I don't expect there's going to be a lot of noise issues when you buy something new. You could just stick these pedals all the way up the wall. You could have 30 or 50 pedals if you want, and have them all going at the same time. But if you are going to do that, I would recommend that you get some kind of electricity filter box, so each pedal has a filtered electricity source which will not generate noise. They cost around about 30 to 80 euros, and that 30 to 80 euros means that all of your pedals will be noise free and the quality of your sound will be closer to professional. You don't have to have the reel-to-reel recorder, but if you're going to make a dub tune, it's always going to sound better with a tape delay or tape echo over it or through it. Even if you're just mastering on the tape machine, I think you will find automatically that the soft compression that comes from using a tape machine is going to give you a really great result in a way that you will not get from just using software strictly, because software alone, it really needs to be modified on minute levels to get the result that you want. If you're not doing that, the tape is going to automatically reduce your music and compress your music to a standard which is quite acceptable, because almost all professional music is recorded onto tape machines as they are mastered. Alright, all you really need, some machine that makes beats. It doesn't matter what the machine is. It could be a little a Boss drum machine, or it could be something bigger or more substantial like the MPC series. It doesn't have to be, because all it is a machine that holds samples, and when you press pads you get sounds. That's all there is to it. A keyboard of some kind, even if it's only a MIDI keyboard to trigger your drum machine, or to make synth bass lines from your sampler or other machine that you may have. Or you could use it as a synthesizer alone, and you could even sequence out of your drum machine and into your keyboard, so that your drum lines can become bass lines, or maybe keyboard lines. Probably bass lines if you use the kick. And then these sounds just basically go straight into your desk, however big it is. It doesn't need to be 22 channels. As long as you've got at least 8, well, let's just say, as long as you've got 16 or 12 channels, you're going to be able to get away with some good mixes. I did a lot of dubs with a 12 channel mixer, but in the end I found it really limited the amount of outs I could use. You don't have to have the tape machine, but it's going to help you do a good job. And if you are willing to spend $100 on something like that, it's going to absolutely transform your sound into something that sounds more retro, and probably the sound that you're going for. Well, that's it for today. I just wanted to give you a look at the studio, and you can judge for yourself whether or not this is the kind of setup you would like to use. I only discovered recently that there's a whole group of people out there not using a digital audio workspace and making all of their music live, like I am doing here. And basically I'm using sequences and mixing live and putting effects in live, which means that this music really is made on the spur of the moment. If you're doing everything on your computer, it's not going to sound so spontaneous, and maybe not so much feeling will be communicated if everything you're doing on your computer is cutting and pasting. So keep that in mind when you put together your studio. I recommend anyone can do this. All you need is a keen interest in music, and you don't need a lot of money to begin. I would say if you spend $100 on a pedal, you're probably spending too much money. If you spend $50 on a pedal, that probably makes a lot more sense. You can buy more pedals. If you buy Behringer pedals, you can probably pick them up for about $30 each, and they're new, so the sound quality shouldn't be too bad. But I would say that the dynamic range of the Behringer pedals is not as good as the Boss pedals. Again, if you're running out of room, stick stuff up on the wall, or build a shelf and stick things up on the shelf. I've only got about 8 square meters in this room, and that's all I need really to get started with making my tunes. So my next video is going to be about putting together a tune, sequencing a drum rhythm and a bass line, and you can have a look at that in the next track. It's called Dub Done Wrong 2.